Is it just me who thinks Spider-Man No Way Home is absolute trash?
No, it's not.
You too?
I didn't like it.
Oh my god, thank you.
Okay, is it just me who doesn't understand how nothing can be done about that Hougang man that is just making a lot of noise for the past 5 years?
Oh no,
Or was it 11 years?
I think 11, but 5 for the girl
my
who posts
God.
about it on TikTok. But no, it's definitely not just you. It's you and pretty much the rest of Singapore.
How? I mean, how can nothing be done? How can one guy just hold an entire block hostage and not have anything like work?
I don't know, but hopefully by the time this episode comes out, they would have done something about it. I guess.
I hope so.
Welcome to Is It Just Me, a podcast where we come clean about the way we secretly feel and realize it's not just us.
Is it just me who wants to leave the group chat?
No, I actually recently left like quite a number. I was doing a bit of spring cleaning.
Oh, wow.
Finally. Yeah. Long
So-
overdue.
How many did you have?
I think at one point, maybe around close to 30. Yeah. But I mean, it's a combination of like personal, like,
Right.
social ones and as well as work ones. Yeah, so I want to say it makes sense, but also it shouldn't.
So what made you do the purge? Like, that's pretty major, actually.
Yeah, no, I think I just felt like it was just way too much going on. Just too many notifications. Like, even if I mute it, right? Like, it's like, you know, you open your WhatsApp and you see like
yeah.
137 notifications, and you're like, I'm not talking to 137 people. It's just like people talking a lot. Like, yeah, so it got a bit overwhelming, and I just said like clear some of it out.
So you just like left. You didn't announce you're leaving.
No, I mean, I think there were a couple where it was kind of like, okay guys, sorry, like I kind of like getting bombarded notifications. I think I'm just gonna like step out for a while. Yeah, the kind of thing.
Nice.
So-
That's very brave.
Yeah. I mean, it just kind of feels like being in a chat group. It's almost like, I don't know, like being at a party that you can't ever leave.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like that too?
Yes, and well done for that. Because even for me, like for work chat, sometimes I feel bad being the first one to leave. Even if the project is over and like even if people aren't talking, it almost feels like a hostile thing to do. Like, okay, I'm done with you.
Like something
I'm just gonna
antisocial,
leave.
right?
Yeah. But even though I recognize that it's not that bad, especially if no one is talking, especially if the project is over. But I would still wait for like someone else to leave first, and then maybe I leave afterwards. Or if it doesn't bother me, like no notifications, I just kind of leave it, like just in case. But
Yeah.
I really don't need to, and I really shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I think that's what happens a lot when most of the time when chat groups that are initially functional, like slowly they become social. So maybe it was a group at first to, I don't know, like go catch a movie together,
Yeah.
right? And then it's for logistics, like you arrange where to meet and what time the show is. But then after you watch the show, like somehow, okay, fine, like it stays active for a day because everyone's like, okay, let me pay you back for the tickets.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah.
Send photos.
Yeah. And then like a week later, oh, hey, here's a meme from like the movie you watch, which I mean, okay, fine, is no harm to that. I love memes, but I don't know. I think what I'm describing is a very singular situation, right?
Yeah.
It's just one group. But I think the issue is when there's a lot of these groups at the same time. So it just feels very everything everywhere all at once, which by the way is a very good movie.
It
You should
is.
watch.
It is a good movie.
Love it.
Yeah, but I totally get you. I still have social group chats from years ago, and I don't know, leaving it kind of, I guess, maybe cements the fact that we're all not that close anymore, and that feels like it might not be a nice thing to acknowledge or do, even though I guess everyone already knows we haven't talked in like years.
That's true. Oh my
Yeah.
god, that's so true. Because I think because you know, the more busy everyone is and the less frequently you get to meet up, it kind of feels like the chat group is this sort of, you know, it's like this invisible thread that you kind of like keeps you guys connected,
Yeah.
even if you don't get to meet for like
Yes.
months.
Yeah.
So leaving it is almost like your way of saying, I
Yeah.
don't want to be in touch.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And like, it's done, it's past, it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess these are just one of the many things we've kind of
Yeah.
thought about in terms of group chats.
But even, okay, like, so these long-time friend groups aside, I think just in general with chat groups, I feel like it's not just me who sometimes finds it a bit daunting and scary to talk in the chat groups. It's like, because it just feels like there's so many people in the group, so many multiple people to please, or to try and not offend, because you can say something that is fine with 2 people in a group, but not with 1. So there's like all these different stakes and different expectations.
Yes, I mean, the weight in numbers is overwhelming. It is scary. I mean, so many people have problems with public speaking. And I guess to me, if you think about it, group chats are sort of a way, a kind of public speaking. If anything, I sometimes feel a bit more pressure because it's in black and white and it stays. The words are there, and like everyone sees it, and it's kind of like immortalized in that way.
Yeah.
You can't really depend on someone not paying attention.
Yeah.
The same way that you do in public speaking. And also how some message platforms shows who has and hasn't read your message.
Oh my god, that's
There's
the worst.
also that pressure as well.
Yeah,
it's like if you don't read it, or if you read it and didn't respond, like, is it like, did I offend you? Did I say something wrong? And like, you can't really, there's the lack of body language that you would usually have at a conversation is completely gone. So everything that you have is just based on what you see or don't see. And that's just a bit scary. Like, why didn't you reply? But on the other end, like when I'm the one who has read a message and not replied, most of the time I guess I mean, I would have a reason. Maybe I am busy, maybe I'm driving, maybe I'm eating, but I have had instances where people would be upset if like, oh, I saw you read your message, like, why did you reply me? Are you angry? I'm
Really?
like, no, I'm and sometimes be like, no, I'm just busy, like I just haven't had time to properly reply you yet. But people don't get to see the context of where you are in your life, like physically and what you're doing and mentally where you're at. And to me, sometimes I feel like there's always that need to explain. So like, you know, do you do that thing where you read the notification but you don't open the message?
all the time. Sorry, but like, it just feels like the easier way to get around it, right? Just like keeping in the loop, but without letting people know you're in the loop.
And even like out of social situations, like professionally, like I might not want people to know that I have read your message, because then I need to like reply about this particular work thing immediately. But if I show that I haven't read it yet, like maybe I get a bit more time to think about it, because I need more time to think about it. But I don't want you to see that I have read it and chosen to so-called ignore it, because then that might result in a bad impression.
And I think the fact that you're even feeling these things, and it's definitely not just you, it's also, it kind of speaks to this sort of unspoken expectation I think people have, that with texting, replies need to be quite fast or prompt, you know? Like, so I think that applies to chat groups as well. So I think that's also part of the stress for me anyway, because there's this expectation to reply fast. So if I'm in like multiple chat groups and different conversations are going on, there's a bit of it's a bit of overload. But it's very interesting that you mentioned that, you know, part of the scary part is when you read a message and you don't reply, or you know, it's so-called you ignore it. I'm doing air quotes because you guys can't see me.
You look very cute doing it.
Thank you. It's very interesting because on the flip side of it, I've noticed this like sort of like little phenomenon where the person who is being ignored, like that's actually also another common fear or anxiety that people have about chat groups. So there's sort of this social anxiety where, okay, if I send out this message in a group chat, am I going to get ignored? Like, is no one going to reply me, and I'm going to look so stupid? And that applies to, because that's how you feel in real life, right? If I make a joke right now at this table and you guys just kind of like ignore it or don't reply me, I'll be like, oh my god, I look so stupid. And I think people feel like that, like in a chat group as well. I actually did some digging through like some Reddit threads, and it is a very real problem. Like, people there are like bringing it up as something that they feel it does affect them, albeit in like very slight ways, but it's never a nice feeling, right? To get ignored, and the chances of that, it can be quite high when you send a message in a group chat. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, I guess if you say something, let's say you try a joke, or you say something funny, or you say something informative, and no one responds to it, and it's like everyone can see that no one has responded.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, those loud silence things, but except
the crickets
it's in text.
thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just there forever. And if you delete it, then that says something else as well. Like you've acknowledged how sad it looks, and then you want to run away.
Yeah, I
And
know.
then it's just
I know.
Okay, but then there are also the many different kinds of group chats, right? So maybe what we've been talking about are mostly, I guess, applicable to all, but maybe some of them have more distinct differences, like professional and casual.
Mhm.
So for me, one of the things that I put in effort, I guess, to be is finding a particular voice that caters to the particular role that I am in a particular group chat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Like
So for
what?
example, in a professional group, like if I am, I don't know, a leader or something,
Mhm.
then you have to talk a certain way.
Mm.
But then in another group where it's casual and I'm just a sister, then I can talk it and another way.
Yeah.
And that constant code switching, sort of,
Mhm.
like code switching your personality, code switching your tone, the words that you use.
Mm.
I guess maybe that does require like quite a bit of work.
Yeah, it does. And I think also, now that you mentioned work, now that I'm thinking about it, within work itself, okay, maybe even family, right? Like, you would think it's just one group chat per setting or per group, but it's always like, okay, if you're at work, you got to have a group chat with your boss and your
Yes.
and your colleagues. But then there's also a separate group chat with just your colleagues, for example.
Yeah.
And then depending on what industry you're in, maybe like you have other group chats with like each for a different client, perhaps.
Yeah.
So it's just a lot like of demand on your attention, your capacity, I think your bandwidth.
Yeah. And even in those similar group chats, like let's say the one with your boss and the one with your colleagues, and maybe one with colleagues that you're particularly close to, I do feel like there's still a difference in a way that you would need to speak.
Yeah, definitely.
Like to maintain the I am closer to you kind of feel, and I'm a bit more professional.
Yeah.
And like even with most of the same people in different groups, there's still a kind of impression you want to portray. Like maybe in my close group of friends, I want to show that, we have a relationship beyond being colleagues.
Yeah.
And then the one where they might be in, as well as with the leaders and the bosses, like, I want to show that I am proficient in my work, I am professional, but I'm not a suck up.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that kind of thing. There's so many layers. Oh gosh.
Yeah. And okay, but I feel like some people may listen to this and they may be thinking like, okay, but actually,
Are we thinking
don't we
too
all
much?
code switch? No, don't we all
okay.
code switch all the time anyway? Like even without chat groups,
That's
right?
true.
But I think the issue here is that when you code switch, it's kind of like when you're, like maybe in the day I'm at work, I'm talking to my boss, and then I go home and I talk differently with my family or whoever, right? But I feel like because for me anyway, like a typical day can be I'm just sitting on my laptop, I've got like my chat apps like open on desktop, and then it's just talking to multiple of these situations within minutes of each other.
Right.
So I think I think with chat groups, or maybe just messaging in general, I don't know, like the frequency of code switching is so hyper, so like
That's
rapid.
true. Yeah,
Yeah.
hyper's a good word.
Yeah.
And especially, let's say you're in a chat group with new friends, and then you have to kind of discover everyone's styles and preferences within that chat. And if you make a mistake, everyone knows.
Has that happened to you before?
Okay, nothing comes to mind so far because I am very careful when it comes to group chats, and by careful I mean silent. So I'm like the lurker. Like I'm there, I'm reading. But yeah, but I'm almost too afraid to really take risks with it. So I just lurk, and if someone calls me out on something that needs to be said or something needs to be answered, I will reply. But I tend to just take the easy way out and just be quiet and maybe interact with them in person instead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I mean, it sounds like it can be quite stressful for you. Like, what do you do in general to manage that?
By not replying everything. In person, I tend to listen and reply to everything that you tell me, because I do want you to know that I am listening to like whatever it is you're telling me and sharing with me. But on group texts where people are doing that for me, unless it's something that I vehemently disagree with or something that's like morally unsound or whatever, I usually kind of just let the conversation go without me.
I can attest to that because I am in a few chat groups with you.
Oh yeah. Oh
Yes.
no. Yeah, but it's not that I don't want to be a part of the conversation. I really do. And I really like the people that I'm in group chats with, and I'm grateful to be in those group chats. But it's just, I don't know why writing things down just feels a bit more concrete.
No,
to
yeah, I was
me.
going to say, I think like it kind of makes sense because different people have different ways of how they want to communicate and chat with like their friends or loved ones. So I have friends who, I mean, you've seen memes, right, where they always say like, what is it, millennials who don't like to answer the phone? You know, like they'll always let like, they'll screen their calls, they'll let it ring, and then they'll just let it go to, I don't know, voicemail or whatever. Yeah, that's me. So I think I'm just the kind of person who doesn't like doing phone calls. But I have friends who love doing phone calls and they don't like texting. I love doing
phone calls, and I don't prefer texting.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's a matter of preference in that sense. It's just that, you know, in a sense, I guess chat groups are just more convenient than doing like a mass phone call with everyone. So yeah, it is what it is.
I mean, the group chats that I am with you, I'm pretty silent, but when I do text you, it's like a lot of caps and a lot of long messages, and a lot of emojis, a lot of like but very, very much the opposite in terms of group chats. But it's not that I'm trying to be a different person. I guess it's just how I react to different circumstances, or maybe a different amount of people.
Yeah. I mean, I think to quote like a comment I found on Reddit actually on this topic. So you got, it's very funny because like, this whole thread of like everyone complaining about chat groups and how like anxious they feel about it, etc., etc. And then like this poor little bugger, like he commented with, "At least you're in a group text." Yeah, it's just like, okay, fine. That's a very good point.
That's very cute.
Yeah, it's a good problem in some ways. At the end of the day, chat groups are still a great way to keep in touch.
They are. They're definitely. It's definitely a good thing. Yeah. I guess we just need to learn how we feel about it, like everything else,
and just learning to draw boundaries. I think because I think, you know, we talk about this unspoken expectation of like having to reply fast. I think that is something we also help to perpetuate by feeling that, giving into that pressure to reply fast. So I think by just standing your ground and knowing that you're not doing anything wrong per se by taking some time to reply, I think just kind of drawing that mental boundary in your head and understanding that you are not doing anything wrong instead of putting that pressure on yourself, I think that will help people. Yeah, I think just kind of
understand.
Yeah. And
that's actually kind of, that's something that I do now that I'm wondering whether I'm doing too much, that it becomes an issue. So like my issue, I guess, of this drawing boundaries is that I take a lot of time to reply. And sometimes in a group chat, if a lot of people are talking constantly and I open my phone and it's like, oh my god, it's like 10 in the morning and there's like 200 messages. And then I kind of just leave it. Yeah. Because it's just throughout maybe the entire morning or like early afternoon, I'm busy with stuff. Yeah. And I don't have the mental capacity to go through 200 messages.
Yeah, exactly.
And then it just keeps growing, right?
Yeah.
And then I feel like I'm never able to catch up. And then when I do catch up and I read through everything, which I actually do, I do read through everything, I am reluctant to reply because it just emphasizes how absent I was. And I don't want to draw attention to the fact that I wasn't there and now I'm trying to be like, oh, haha, like, hi. And that's like actually something I used to do. I used to go back, like I was part of this Discord and I would go all the way back, like hundreds of messages, and I would reply like to almost everyone.
Oh my gosh.
And it would just be like, reply and then like ha ha ha, or like, oh, this is really cute. And then it almost became like a game. Like I think they did seem to find it endearing and they would be like, ha, Lisa, like let's just like bombard her with messages so Lisa can't catch up, and then that would be like a game. And we're just like, okay, fine, like I'm glad that you're taking it so well, but I don't want you to think that I don't care. And I hope that this doesn't get so old that you just get frustrated and then think that I don't want to be involved, or that I don't want to put in the time and effort to maintain relationships, which I do. It just takes a bit more out of me than being physically there with a group of people, I think.
Well, if you ask me, I think if your friends are joking about it, they probably understand, you know, like what you're coming from. I just think, so I know it sounds like, it sounds a bit ridiculous and very first world to be complaining about like chat groups, and I totally believe me, I'm totally aware of that. So I think people tend to overlook that people need different types of rest. It's not just physical rest. Like social rest is important. So, and I think being in multiple chat groups, it does expose you to a lot of social contact in a way. So like you said, you woke up to like 200 notifications. That's like a nightmare for me. So so I think having to protect yourself from that, it is important. Yeah, so it comes down to boundaries.
Yeah, that's good advice. Maybe I should feel less bad about taking so long. Although I should reply faster to my work texts. Oh gosh.
Okay, but I think it's more than just texting, right? I think just taking a step back, it's just digital communication as a whole.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's emails, it's DMs, it's everything. And it's interesting because the stressful part of that, like part of it anyway, is like we talked about, like the social anxiety of it. And I think when it comes to digital communications and therefore most likely written communications, there is so much room for misunderstanding because so much is lost, like tone.
Yes.
Well, mostly tone, like body language, all of that stuff.
Expressions.
Yeah, exactly. So I was reading this book by the Netflix CEO, Reed Hastings. It's called No Rules Rules. And it's quite interesting because it was about how Netflix builds their culture and how they do things. Although, given recent events, I don't know if that's a book people want to read anymore.
Right.
But it was still very interesting.
Yeah.
I read it some time ago, and one of the chapters that really stuck with me it was actually about this very topic they were talking about. Not just because it's interesting, but also because it specifically mentions the Singapore office.
Yeah?
So, yeah. It's quite interesting.
Wow.
Okay, so the story is this. It's the chapter, to give context, it's about how Netflix was going global. They were setting up offices in different countries. And so the story is there's this girl in the Singapore office. Her name is Carlene. And I think, so okay, I mean, full disclosure here, I read this book some time ago, so I may be getting a few of the facts wrong, but the general gist will be correct. So Carlene generally does administration, if I'm not wrong, and I think someone in the company had left. So she was kind of taking over. It was a handover, but from what it sounded like, it was not a very complete handover or something because there was a lot of overlap and there were some things that fell into the cracks.
Right.
Yeah, so what happened was she was supposed to organize some calls, like all those online calls, for the team in the US, syncing them up with people in Singapore, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So what happened was, one of the calls, it went wrong because there were a couple of people who didn't show up for the call.
Ooh.
So the people in the US were kind of left hanging and waiting around.
Oh no.
So after that, they sent her a message. And Carlene was so upset by the message. She said she really had to just like step out of the office, walk around a bit. Like she couldn't reply right away. She was so angry. And she thought it was so rude. So it was interesting because for this book, they asked her, "Oh, could you show us the message?" So okay, I'm going to read it to you because I dug it up. Okay, and you tell me what you think. The message goes, Carlene, with a dash. We woke up early to call, but the partners didn't call, full stop. We could have used that time for another call, full stop. Can you try reviewing the previous day's scheduled calls, and if it doesn't come through, delete them from your calendar, ? I feel like I'm doing a dictation test with you, but do you need to hear that again? Let me show it to you, actually.
Okay. Okay, weirdly, it sounded more stern when you read it.
Okay, so that's the interesting thing. Yeah, because when I was reading it, I was trying to sound neutral. Like,
right.
Because I felt like if I injected my own tone into it, it would kind of like contaminate it a bit.
Right.
So if you read this text, and you notice there are no exclamation marks, there are no smileys, no emojis, of course. It's full stops here and there, it's a question mark. How would you take it if you were Carlene?
Okay, if I had only heard you say it in your neutral tone, and maybe it was the neutral tone that sounded stern because it's like emotionless, right? It's like there's no friendliness whatsoever.
Yeah.
I was like, oh shit, like I'm in trouble.
Okay, but yeah, if you read the text, so there's no speaking it, like you just read it.
Reading the text, it was like, okay, like when you read it, the last sentence felt a bit condescending. Like, couldn't you, like, shouldn't you have done that? But if I read it as it was written, like looking at it now, it looks okay.
Okay.
Like, I'm not angry at the way they said it.
Yeah.
If anything, I'm just worried like, oh my god, what did I do wrong?
Oh, same. So that's the thing. When I read it, I didn't find it rude, but I did feel like it felt like they were upset with me.
Yeah.
Like, that's how I perceived it.
But it also feels like, oh, it is my fault.
Yeah.
So like, oh shit, like, I'm so sorry. Like, yes, I will do this and review them and like make sure this doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have been angry at all.
Yeah. But it's very interesting because she was, and when the writers of the book, the people who helped to do the research, like when they asked around, different people from different like countries, like in the Netflix office, they all gave very different views. Obviously, to the people in the US, it was just a very direct request.
Yes.
Like, this messed up. Can you check this? You know, let's not let it happen again.
Yeah.
We could have used the time for another call. But the people in the Singapore office, so not all of them, but there were quite a number who were with Carlene on this, in the sense that they felt that it could have afforded to be, like, they could have afforded to be friendlier. They could have started it off with, hey Carlene, thanks for arranging this, or whatever. And I think it's also the fact that he started it straight away with Carlene. Yeah. Instead of, hi Carlene, okay Carlene. So all these little tiny things, it seems to affect different people depending on their context, like their background, how they perceive things. Yeah. I thought that was very interesting because I think it really shows just how much room there is for conflict and hurt feelings, like even unintentionally. Yeah. When we are exposed to so much digital communication. So yeah, I don't know. Like, I asked around friends actually to ask them, but because the context is, for this Netflix thing, they did actually ask people, okay, so what would you have done? Like, how would you have typed this text to make it sound nicer or friendlier? And, you know, people said, like what I just said, you're starting off with a greeting, starting off with sandwiching it, right? That's what they say. You start off by acknowledging what she did well or right. And then kind of pointing out what's the problem. Yeah, and then kind of sandwiching it. So, and then there were others who said, oh, maybe she could have thrown in an exclamation mark. Right. And I thought that's actually something I do a lot.
That's something I do a lot as well.
Yeah, to sound... I mean, sometimes it's natural. Sometimes it comes from my personality, right? If I'm excited or whatever. But I do recognize that sometimes when I type work emails, especially work emails,
you're too happy.
I am not in an exclamation point mood, man. Like, as in most of the time, like, are we in an exclamation point mood when we're at work? No, like, but there's always an exclamation point a lot of time when people, very often at the end, right? Like, hey, could you please see attached? Blah 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 blah. Thanks! Exclamation mark. Right. Yeah, I noticed that a lot, and so I asked around, like my friends, people I talk to, people I work with. So do you use exclamation points consciously in your emails, your work text or whatever, to sound friendlier? And actually, quite a number of them do. I gotta say, quite surprisingly. Yeah. Yeah. And okay, so I was trying to find a common pattern. Initially I thought, okay, it's because, you know, there is this stereotype that like it's something that's more like likely to be done by girls. So I just kind of try to observe that pattern in my own circle only. But it's interesting because there were like males who do that as well. Yeah. Yeah, but I was trying to think, okay, but I don't know, it felt like it was the more extroverted or sociable ones who do that. So I don't know. I mean, it's inconclusive. I couldn't find much of a pattern. Yeah, I just thought it was very interesting, like, to see how we kind of try and accommodate and sound friendlier than we actually do, and therefore how we then read and interpret things from other people. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it's like the whole... I saw this TikTok on like this guy going through the way people say okay. Like there's okay.
Oh my god,
there's
I was gonna get to that.
K. Yeah. There's oki. Yeah. There's okay with like the whole word. Yeah. And then there's K. And like some people have such strong opinions about this.
Dude, you have no idea. I have had this conversation with like my friends before. It's so funny because everyone had a different take on it. Like there were people who thought K, just the letter K, is very rude. And felt like KK sounds nicer, like it sounds friendlier. Right. But then on the another level, there were people who still felt like KK is not very nice. Right. Which
it's I'm not in that. K.
Yeah. Oh goodness. I mean,
he's so stressful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's just different writing styles, right? Like some
Yeah.
people text the way they talk, which is kind of what I do most of the time.
Mm.
And some text like they write, like, I guess in the more formal way that you would maybe craft an email. Like sometimes the way my dad texts, it's so formal. Although I would have to say he is changing a little bit to be a bit more casual in like the family chat.
Yeah.
But I've seen like his texts with his friends and stuff, and it's just like, oh my gosh, it's like so serious.
Yeah,
And he's
I
like,
know.
no, it's very friendly. It's fine. I'm like, the amount of full stops and like every sentence is so short and like, it's so like it's a bit boring.
Okay, but like generally dads get a hall pass on this. I'm like,
that's true.
you know,
It's like it's really this particular way that they talk,
Yeah.
but it seems that it goes from like dad to dad,
yeah,
or like
yeah.
dad to boy.
Yeah.
They seem to get it.
Yeah.
But for me, it's like, oh, you really don't want to talk to me? Then don't talk to me lah.
Yeah, exactly. I have had people. So if I reply people with maybe just a full stop, or I don't use punctuation or whatever, and I just use talk like no caps lock, whatever,
Yeah.
right? I do get people asking me, "Are you upset?
Yeah.
Are you okay?"
Yeah.
Like So, and conversely, I do
Okay,
feel that way as well. Sometimes.
Do you do that intentionally ever? Like you don't send punctuation because you're upset?
That has happened before, yes. But not it wasn't like a conscious like, okay, you know what? I'm upset. Fuck you, full stops. Like, I'm going to disrespect grammar. It's not like that. It's just more like when you're upset, it doesn't feel appropriate to talk like add an exclamation mark. It doesn't feel appropriate to add an emoji. It's just more like
it's
like
a
that.
bit dishonest, I guess.
It's natural,
Yeah.
I think. So I think that's also why people aren't sure.
Yeah.
I think it's also about your baseline. If you normally text with a lot of
Right.
emotion in, like a lot
So the lack would
screaming,
then mean
whatever.
something.
Yeah. So it's more noticeable. It's more jarring. I remember recommending one of my friends to join this company. Where I knew some of the people who worked in that company, and my friend was, how do I put this? So she was a junior, and she was under like a more senior staff, and I knew that senior staff. So when I was just checking in, my friend asking, "Oh, how's your first week at work? Are you liking it?" She's like, "Yeah, it's all good. It's just." I don't think the senior staff likes me. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, she seems very, I don't know, like a bit fierce. I was like, wait, why? And then she said, I just looked at her, like her comments on my work, and then she showed me. And it was same thing. It's just very direct. It was just like, okay, this needs a bit more whatever. Or like take a look at this part. Something. It's just all full stops. And I realized that was the issue. And the funny thing is, so this was a few years ago, and my friend she stayed on in the company, and she's actually kind of like, she got promoted, she kind of rose up to become a more senior staff. Yeah, good for her. And it's very funny because I noticed that her comments and feedback to her staff, the other staff, were also like
that.
It was like that.
Oh.
Yeah. I actually feel like for some people, there is a bit of correlation, I feel like with, I can't tell if it's age or life experience or like career stage. I feel like there is a sort of pattern there. I feel like when people first start out, not everyone obviously, but like I do notice a lot of people when they first start on their careers, when they're very junior, they tend to be a lot more eager.
Right.
And so I noticed that like the number of exclamation marks is more in their work texts and work emails compared to like someone who is more senior in the so-called the corporate hierarchy.
Do you think it's because they don't feel the need to prove how eager they are anymore? They don't need to please as much anymore.
Exactly.
So they're just comfortable being like direct. Like, I don't have time to like try and make you like me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Nice.
I think that's it. It's quite interesting. All this over punctuation.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, like overall, I guess like the rules of texting and maybe even emails. I mean, it's relatively new. So the rules of these things are quite unwritten. It's sometimes almost trendy.
Yeah.
And when and how do you know what is suddenly acceptable and what isn't? Like, I guess we're all trying to figure that out.
It's always evolving.
Yeah.
Like I read this book. It's called Because Internet. And it's about actually like the rules of language in the new age, right? And it's pretty great because there was a line from it I really liked. When it comes to text messaging, the period or the full stop has lost its original purpose because rather than needing a symbol to indicate the end of a sentence, you can simply hit send. So I thought that was very interesting because it's basically a cardinal sin, right? To omit a full stop at the end of a sentence. Like if I read a book,
Right.
and there were no
like
full
you
stops.
can't.
It's just not something
Yeah.
you do. But I think what's interesting is that because of the text messaging medium, and she's right, because I don't always put full stops at the end of my sentences, like especially if it's just one, right? Like I just hit send. So I think what the book was trying to make the point about was that slowly, the rules of language, they are eroding, they're evolving, they're always changing. Even how people, even emojis, right? Like in the past, it was pretty simple and direct. Like a happy emoji is straightforward. It's a happy emoji. But I think like over time, what's interesting about language and written communication is that people insert more and more of their own emotion and meaning into it. So now you've got people using happy emojis, but ironically, I could be telling you, hey, I'm dying at work with like a smiley.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And it kind of like I do
but
that.
you understand. Some people understand.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's exactly what you said. Like it's just always evolving. It's never. It's constantly changing. So you can't. It's really impossible to keep up, I think, and there shouldn't be any pressure to, I suppose.
Yeah.
And it's just understanding that. I think it's understanding that like how someone writes to you, it's not always. How do I put this? It's not always how it's intended to be expressed. It's always you always see it through your own lens. Right? It's like taking a photo and you're always using this filter, and that filter is your own understanding of things, which I think a lot of people tend to forget in the heat of the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, writing accurately to your intentions is a learned skill professionally. I mean, you would know that like out of all people, you're a copywriter and a very, very good one, I must say.
Thank you.
It's a learned skill that takes years to be good at. And it's not realistic to expect everyone to have this ability, especially in casual conversation.
I mean, even in a face-to-face conversation, misunderstandings can happen. So what more a conversation like via text or an email, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I do to kind of cope with this is that I write and edit long texts on notes before sending it out so that I can go back and edit it.
Yeah.
Try to read it as the recipient and then see whether, am I saying anything offensive? Am I using punctuation enough or too much?
Yeah.
Like because it's text, right? So sometimes I would replace the full stop with an emoji.
Yeah.
Or sometimes I would just add it here and there so that you know that I'm not being too serious, or if I'm giving feedback that is constructive but maybe about a negative thing, I would try and like make it sound a bit more lighthearted with like a GIF, or I don't know, so many ways. And sometimes I'll even let it sit for a while so I can come back to it and like, as a person who sees it for the first time. Like this, I think way too much about it, but it does stress me out.
I saw you're writing a thesis or something. Like,
yeah. And it does feel like me sometimes if the message means a lot. And it doesn't have to be like professionally means a lot. It could be like a person that I care about who is going through a hard time. I don't want it to appear a certain way. Or like someone who has shared something very important with me and I want to show that I do appreciate, how much you shared, and I want to give you a reply that's just as good.
Yeah.
Just as meaningful.
Yeah.
And I want to communicate that as accurately as I can to how I feel.
Yeah.
And something that I didn't know existed that you let me know about was these tone tags.
Yeah, I know.
What are they?
Actually, I think it's a pretty good idea. I mean, I like, it's something I learned about only recently, but people have started using tone tags, which is essentially they use like a, what do you call that? Is it a backward slash?
I don't know.
Slash.
Slash. I'll just call it a slash.
With a couple of like what do you call it? Abbreviation? Yeah, to kind of signify what the tone is. It's actually kind of, initially the intent was for neurodivergent people who may not be able to understand tone or irony or sarcasm, for example.
Okay.
Who may struggle a bit with that. So, they've got things like the slash and then maybe F, and that means like fake, or G, and it means like genuine, or LI, literally. So we've got all this. There's a whole legend actually, out there for the different ways that people clarify and specify the tone that they intend, which I think is very helpful actually. If I ever get around to learning
oh my gosh, it's so many.
Yeah, I mean, even down right now, like what I'm looking at, it's really just a mere fraction of the different kinds of tones you can put down.
Why don't they just do voice notes? That's something I've been using more, actually.
Yeah.
Like I have a friend and we like to send like long texts. Oh, we talk about a lot of things at once. And sometimes I'm just like, I am too tired to type everything out, and I'll just send her a voice note. And a voice note can extend to like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
And I know my sister has some that extend to like an hour. So you can say that it's like, I know it's like
hour.
a podcast, right? And like
it's
an hour.
longer than this podcast. Wait, there's no limit on how long you can record?
Okay, so like the video function on Telegram does have a limit.
Okay.
The voice note one doesn't. And I don't think
No way.
WhatsApp has a limit as well. Or at least if it does, I haven't hit it.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So sometimes I want to reply everything that she's saying. So I would just like hit the record button and I would just go through her message and I'll just talk. And I find that so much easier.
Yeah.
Also because I can kind of like, oh yeah, I thought this. But actually, no. I can kind of like, have a conversation without having a conversation. Whereas in text is like, when you want to make changes, you have to type it out. You have to make changes. You have to like do like grammar and like punctuation and emojis and all that kind of stuff. But this one is like, I can kind of let my words run.
Yeah.
And of course, I don't do this with everyone. I don't do this like in a work setting.
Yeah, of course.
It's only people that I'm familiar with and can, I guess, be the same self that I would be in person.
Yeah.
But I do prefer that sometimes, which is why I prefer phone calls as well.
Yeah.
Okay. And I also like that phone calls are like with only one person. Although I remember in secondary school, like when conference calls were a thing, everyone was just like, oh my god, they can talk to like 2 people at once.
Wait, what? Secondary school?
I think
calls?
Like when home phones are still a thing.
Oh yes. Yeah.
Yeah. It was just like it was a feature that was popular for a very short amount of time.
I remember
because
now.
then handphones became the next big thing.
Yeah.
But it was like, oh wow, like talking to 2 people was just amazing. Didn't know it was gonna come back and like bite us back in the butt.
No, but it kind of makes sense because I think like what you said earlier when we were talking about texting, right?
Yeah.
Like you talked about the stress of it being everything's in black and white. So I can kind of see why you take so much care with like the text you send, because you're right. Like especially if it's sending to someone who is down, for example, or whatever situation, like it is going to be black and white. Once you send it out there, once you put it out into their universe, they get to read, like they get to like read. You can't imagine like how many times they're gonna reread it. What kind of meaning are they gonna extract from it?
Yes.
You can't control that.
Yeah, the different interpretations.
So I get it. I feel like maybe when you try and edit your O-level essay, like it on your phone, it's kind of you trying to, I guess, control as much as you can in a sense, like of what is conveyed. Yeah,
like really as much as I can, try to be as clear and not. I mean, okay, I feel like there's a balance between trying to be as accurate as you are in terms of how you're feeling and your tone, but then also there's the other side where do I sacrifice a bit of tone so I can be clearer in my message, in what I'm trying to say, and then just try to balance that.
Yeah. You know, my favorite part about this is, as I'm hearing you say all this, I realize that, people always say when they have all these like Zoom calls and they're like, okay, this could just be an email. I realize you're the opposite. You're the opposite. You're the reverse. You would rather do a call than like...
Okay, true. But I'm also not a fan of really long meetings. For me, when I see that meme, what I think is this could have been an email is like you could have just stated all the things that you needed to talk about in a very factual, like productive fashion instead of going in circles discussing one issue for 10,000 years. Yeah. So I do appreciate in professional settings how an email would force you to think through everything that you're saying. As compared to a meeting where you can just kind of like blab your way through and then it might not be productive. So I do think there's a time and place for both.
That's true. But I have seen way too many colleagues and friends be terrorized by a mere email. Honestly, I have seen it give friends anxiety, colleagues and friends anxiety. I have literally seen someone go into the washroom right after she received an email to cry. I do think it's interesting. Like I always think, how would I deal with it? Because I'd be lying if I say I've literally never been affected by an email before. And I think it's really just about I think also just remembering that even I myself, like, don't always mean things the way they sound when I text or when I write email. For example, even when I'm writing, like, for example, LOL on a text, I'm not exactly, like, really laughing. I find it funny, but it you know what I mean? So I realized also it's not like the way I type, it's 100% accurate, you know? So
Yeah.
why would I expect
Everyone
that of
else.
other people? And I think it's just kind of just being chill with it. Yeah, honestly. We're just not meant or wired to deal with so much communication at the same time, whether it's group chats, whether it's emails or whatever, right? It's just that stress of being available 24/7, right? It just feels
Yeah.
like there's always one way for someone to reach you. I have been guilty of this, right? If I'm supposed to reach out, I'm supposed to like get in touch with someone, and then I tell my friends, oh, I tried WhatsApping the person, and the person's like, oh, have you tried Telegram? Have you tried DM them on Instagram? So I have friends, I have one friend, shout out to her, who is literally the most responsive only via Twitter.
Huh?
Yeah, like she doesn't reply text. She doesn't really reply Instagram DMs or whatever. But once I tweet her, she replies.
What?
Yeah, so but my point is, it just feels like there are just so many open channels of communication to reach
Right.
you in this age. So I think it's just that feeling of, that feeling of just always being available to anyone. Anyone can reach you at any time at this point. So
And I guess in being communicated with so often, there probably will be miscommunications here and there.
Mm.
But ultimately, these are forgivable and not life-threatening.
Yep.
As much as it can feel that way, it's not going to kill you.
Do you remember that time when we were at this birthday party and we played this sort of like party game where I think some of those what is it, like a two truths? No, wait, what is it? Oh, it's like, so we were split into groups.
And then I think everyone had to write something about them, and then everyone had to guess who this person, like
Yeah,
who was
which-
the one that wrote this.
Correct. Yeah, so
Yeah.
everyone had to write like trivia about themselves.
Yeah.
And then there was like the sort of the game host, right? The game master who took one of the pieces of paper and she read it out. And she said, oh, okay, this person wrote, I don't like uni. And then I remember we were all kind of guessing like who it is, and we're just thinking, okay, who here like generally doesn't like school, like generally always like proclaim themselves as not very academically inclined. And then okay, we figured, okay, maybe it's this person. So I think we guessed that person, and I think it turned out to be correct. But what was really funny to me was that when that person said, yeah, it's me, and then he said, also I meant it as I don't like uni.
Like sea urchin, right?
Yeah. So
I mean, even something as simple as this.
yeah.
I mean, technically, a person could have properly written university, but with the existence of slang, even that is a chance of miscommunication.
Yeah.
And to be honest, to me, being involved with people will always carry a risk of being misunderstood.
Yeah, exactly.
Like there's no running from it. But we just need to, we need to learn to be comfortable with the way we talk. If not, that's just not sustainable, because we will always be meeting new people, and the constant adapting and learning is so exhausting. And and I feel, at least personally, we need to be okay with the way that we communicate.
Yeah.
Just so that, we don't burn out on our own trying to adapt to literally
It's emotional labor.
like hundreds of people.
I think never be afraid to clarify at the end of the day.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's a text or email, whichever. Yeah, it's totally okay to just clarify and ask, did you mean it like this? Words are just always magnified or minimized based on your context. Everything's relative. So just always remember that, I guess. Shout out to Carlene from Netflix.